back to Mathematical Minutes with Mrs. Ross. This week we're going to talk about telling time using digital and analog clocks. So there are two types of clocks that we encounter throughout the day. We have analog clocks, which are the ones that you're used to seeing probably in the classroom, and then there are digital clocks. Probably you've seen the digital clocks in a lot more places. They're on microwaves, stoves, they're in cars, but both of these clocks can help us to tell time, and we're going to talk today about how we can read the time to the half hour using both of these tools. So now that we've talked about our two different types of clocks, we're going to talk a little bit about the parts of those clocks, because the parts are going to be really important to helping us learn how to tell time on them. Now, since we're most familiar with the digital clock, most of the time we understand how to read that. We have our numbers, we can tell that this clock is showing us 10 o'clock. With the analog clock, we have a few more parts that we need to be familiar with in order to help us read it. The first part that we need to be familiar with is this entire part here. This is called the face of the clock, just like your face. This is where we see all the information. We also have a few hands that we use to read the clock. This longest hand right here, some people call it the long hand, is actually called the minute hand. The minute hand will take 60 minutes to travel all the way around the clock. 60 minutes is 1 hour. This hand is called our hour hand. Some people call it the short hand. In order for this hand to make it all the way around the clock, it will take 12 hours. And in a day, 24 hours, that hand will take 2 trips around this clock. Now, these two hands can help us to tell time on this clock, but you also notice that we have another hand here. Not all clocks have this hand, but it's called the second hand, and this one usually moves a lot faster than the other two hands, and we can use it to time shorter periods of time. But we're going to focus our attention today on that hour hand and minute hand on our analog clock. So now that we're familiar with parts of our clock, let's take a look at how we can use those parts to help us actually figure out the time. We're going to start with telling time to the hour. Now, on my analog clock that I have here, I see that my minute hand, or my long hand, is pointing towards the 12. My hour hand, or short hand, is pointing towards the 10. That tells me on this clock that it's showing 10 o'clock. If I wanted to think about what that looked like on a digital clock, I have it here too. 10 o'clock on a digital clock would look like 10:00. On our analog clock, 10 o'clock looks like minute hand at the 12, hour hand at the 10. So if our clock were to be changed to say 6 o'clock, slowly, see how fast our time goes? We're in fast forward. To show a time like 6 o'clock, our minute hand would point to the 12 and our hour hand would point to the 6. If we showed it on our digital clock, instead of a 10 being there, we would see a 6. Now, when we think about telling time to the half hour, we're going to focus on our digital clock first and then take a look at what this looks like on the analog clock. We talked a little bit earlier about how our hour has 60 minutes. If we're talking about telling time to the half hour, a half of 60 would be 30. So looking at our digital clock to show the time 10:30 would really be 10:30. Now this is going to look a little bit different on our analog clock because our hands show the time in a slightly different way. If we look at the position of our minute hands and our hour hands on our analog clock to show 10:30, we can see that that minute hand is pointing towards the 6. Remember before, for 10 o'clock, it was up here at the 12. So if we go halfway around the clock, we end up here at the 6. For our hour hand, that's the short hand, I can see that since my clock travels this way, my hour hand is leaving the 10 and headed towards the 11, because in another half hour, this clock will show 11 o'clock. On my digital clock, I would show 10:30 as 10:30. And on my analog clock, I would show 10:30 or 10:30 in this way. Well, thanks for joining us for this week's Mathematical Minutes with Mrs. Ross. Join us again next week where we talk about 2D shapes. Say goodbye, Ella.